am I right in assuming that it was the workshop of December 15th where you say you get a big, great presentation with Rick Canale, our 4A operator, and we decided we'll come back on January 14th, sharpen your pencil, do a presentation of what a study would cost on this sludge dryer and all that stuff. Is that about how it went down?
That's about how it went down. Rick and I, about a month ago, came in and did our dog and pony show, giving the state of the plant, the technology that we saw, what we saw as savings we could produce, revenue we could generate, and also talked about, landfill closings and things like that. Obviously, the town board saw value in what we presented and allowed us to reach out to Barton LaJudas to look at the next step as to cost of doing a study and evaluation and moving a little bit further. So with that, I give you Ken Knudsen, Senior Vice President of Barton LaJudas, and I will let you introduce your team.
I will do that. So we do have 4 of us here tonight. I don't know if we should be standing somewhere to be on camera or how this thing's working.
She's got all over the place.
But you all know Leeson. She's working on the plant project now and the pump station projects. You know Pete and I, we've been in front of the board many times and working on the plant and the pump stations. And this is George Bevington. He too is a 4A operator. He's on our digester triage team. And he's a former client of ours that he's going to speak to some of his experience with some of the larger plants and solids handling and whatnot. So we do have a tough act to follow, but you're going to see a lot of good material in here that's already been presented to you. This is another opportunity for discussion that can save you money. So I think it's pretty appropriate to follow what was just covered here with parks. But it does kind of put you in a different mindset here that we're going to have to change the name from your treatment plant from a water pollution control facility or a WPCF to a WRRF, which is a water resource recovery facility. And that's not really a new term. It's actually been around for quite some time in some publications that were developed, I think, back in maybe around 2009 or so, 2010. And what that is basically in this time of beneficial reuse and green energy and carbon footprint reduction, as we've talked about your current project, there's many funding programs out there, a lot of which are focused on just that. So this way of looking at your treatment facility changes from, okay, you got all this stuff and you got to put all this power into it and treat it to get to clean water. Now it's basically looking at, well, you've got the stuff coming in, but there's a lot of things in there that we can actually extract and reuse and save money in doing that. So with that, the 3 of us, myself, Pete, and George, are going to run through some of these.
Ken, I don't mean to cut you off, but the new world of COVID with these workshops, they're now televised. And I know that Karen's got the screen up, but I don't know without you with a microphone if people at home can. I can hear your voice fine. You can hear it? Okay. Oh, we've gotten high tech, haven't we, Ken?
I'm wired up.
Never mind.
No problem. Yeah, at any time, sure. If anyone has any questions on this is open discussion, okay. So feel free to interrupt us. So, fairly quick agenda tonight, talking about your asset renewal needs, that being, your what equipment needs to be upgraded following your clarifier replacement here. What are some of the optimization opportunities, both on the process side and more in particular your energy use side? What do we bring to the table? Why is B&L being considered for this? That's kind of going to be between George and I presenting our experience, and then we are a Flex Tech, NYSERDA Flex Tech appointed term contractor. So I'm going to get into that, and it's through NYSERDA that we'd like to prepare a study here that takes a deeper dive into your energy use and optimization of your process, basically to save money. That said, we're going to run through a general scope of service. It's pretty similar to a PR, but like I said, it's going to take a deeper dive into your solids handling process and energy use and stuff like that. And then the schedule, which is pretty aggressive, acknowledging that you're on the heels of this project, this phase one being wrapped up, funding programs starting to come out. We want to hit the ground running, you got to move shovel ready. So we're going to go through that as well.
And I'm George Bennington. I've been with B&L on both sides of the aisle. They were a client of mine back in a previous life. The last several years I've been back on a daily basis. I was kind of lucky because Art brought me in a year and a half or so ago to do a little bit of technical assistance, and I got to work with your staff on some biogas issues, digester issues. So we've gotten to know your folks, and that's really important because the last thing you want is the engineers to come up with a great solution and not have the staff that really has to buy in. So this is the day I was out there doing some technical assistance, and I was pretty impressed with maintenance and operations staff. We solved a few problems.
I'm going to provide a real brief overview. Obviously, as Ken mentioned, Ken and myself have been in front of the board several times regarding the work that's ongoing, the original study. Essentially, this is and I think Art mentioned this to me beforehand. This is hopefully the last time we use the term Phase 2 WWTP. We're really looking at kind of the rebranding of the WRRF. But an overview of the studies we've previously done, we did the original PER. We came back and did a revised PR to look at that regional alternative. We also took a harder look at the solids processing facilities. Right now, we're in the Phase 1 project. The biggest need back in 2016 was the secondary clarifiers. That project is wrapping up. The third clarifier is probably going to be, the two clarifiers are currently operating. Third clarifier will be starting up probably the next month. Along with that, there's a new backup generator. That generator is complete. We're working out some of the startup issues, but basically that generator is currently operating on that end. That the concept of Phase 2 really was that the PER presented the overall plan upgrades. The current Phase 1 project was driven out of necessity, what the really immediate failed infrastructure was. So it includes some of the other supporting components, effluent disinfection, an upgrade to the biological treatment process, additional solids handling, meaning the primary clarifier and the additional grit removal process, upgrading on the solids handling systems, and then overall just energy efficiency. When we talk about energy efficiency, a lot of it's driven, aeration drives a lot of this. There's certainly the plant is operating it operates somewhat blind. There's a lot of new technologies and new innovations regarding how to make a biological system more energy efficient. So I got to talk and drive here. So to mention real quick on with respect to the asset renewal and the opportunities for the aeration process. These are the aeration tanks. These are kind of sketched as what the current concept would be. Currently, the tanks operate in there's 3 basins, and ultimately, yeah, unfortunately, I can't point to this. So one of the challenges at let me go back. One of the challenges with the facility is simply footprint. There's not a lot of area to develop. So the process we have is really focused on kind of providing a more more conservation of space. It's called a fixed film process. The specific process we looked at was an integrated fixed film activated sludge process. So essentially take the same tank, we reconfigure the plumbing, and we add media in there. Essentially increase the surface area to actually enhance the biological efficiency of the process. Along with that, the biological process runs on blowers. Those blowers are pushing air through a lot of diffusers in the bottom of this. They currently run, I think they run continuously right now. So a modern facility they will monitor oxygen levels, and they will ramp the speed of the blowers up and down, and new blowers will come on. So there's additional controls that in and of themselves will provide some significant increase in some significant enhancements to energy efficiency. Second part of this, the crux of this, and I think this is really what's driving a lot of these discussions, is on the solids handling. If we looked at we did the Phase 1 project with that need of, you had clarifiers that had failed. The town was really limping along with about 1.5 clarifiers. And since Art's been involved, and certainly since Rick's been involved, there's been an identified need, and that was reflected in the original PER, that the solids handling facilities are deficient. Our findings indicated that right now, there's not enough capacity just to digest the solids, but there's safety issues. There's issues with the digester covers, so there's a lot of methane being currently leaked to the atmosphere. The gas flare that's required to kind of control that gas, that's not currently code compliant. It sits on top of the building. So there's a lot of issues with respect to code compliance, safety, and overall efficiency of the system. So the other piece of this is that the digestion process itself, by not being as efficient, that ends up you're generating more solids than you need to. That the end result of that is there's more tonnage leaving the site. There's a tipping fee issue with that. So with that, obviously, the reduction of a more efficient digestion process or solids management process ultimately leads to a reduced volume, reduced percent solids, reduced tonnage that requires landfilling. I mentioned the environmental safety benefits. So part of the focus, and this is where George comes in with respect to some of the new technologies that are out there. There's a lot of things happening. The market's kind of driving a lot of these needs right now. Landfilling, as the tipping fees are significantly increased, and Art can attest to this. I think the $65 per ton, we probably plugged that number in our original study. We're currently at over, those fees have doubled, and coupled with that, there's locally, there's 3 landfills that have a potential. One of the landfills is closed in 2028, one's closed in 2025, and there's 4 landfills. The 2 Monroe County landfills will currently not accept town of Webster sludge. And I think at that, I'm going to turn over the conclusions to...
Yeah, so to summarize what you've already heard from Art and Rick, as well as what Pete has kind of run through here, there's several reasons why this project needs to be done and benefits to the town. Again, the most pressing being you've got very old equipment that needs to be revamped, replaced with modern equipment to make it more energy efficient, code compliant. Of course, your ultimate goal here is increase and improve your operator safety. Aeration, if that's not addressed, then you start to run into speedies compliance issues. Of course, meeting speedies permit limits, that's the job of your operators. That's a must, as you know. You want to avoid that. Tipping fees, as Pete just reviewed. And then with a facility like this, as George and I are going to discuss a little bit on some examples, you've got the opportunity to turn this, potentially put in facilities that could provide revenue in the form of a merchant facility, that being in the form of septage and leachate, what you've done in the past, but however some of your recent equipment deficiencies have stopped that. Energy and process optimization, again, not only good for your bottom line each year, but there's also grants that can be leveraged through looking at that. We are going to revisit the design flows and loads. I think the last ones we had were probably 2017. We typically look at 3 years worth with the new clarifiers in place, new operator on board. We want to look at the best data, and again, we're going to look at a 20-year planning period here for the town service area and make sure that there's capacity for growth. So we're just basically revisiting and updating the numbers that we did in the prior PR. And as I said at the beginning, ultimate goal here is to put in some improvements here and basically convert this into a water resource recovery facility. So I've been with the firm for 30 years, and in that time have done several plant upgrades. These plants have ranged anywhere from 10,000 gallons a day to 5 to 8 million gallons a day, and George, of course, has some experience with much larger plants as it relates to their solids handling. So here's a few examples, some of which are within New York State, and then there are some that are outside of New York State. And a couple of these we would consider true conversions to water resource recovery facilities. So the first one that's very similar in size to Webster's would be up in the village of Malone, which of course is way up north. This was recently completed last year, and it included improvements across the board, from septic receiving to headworks to primary clarifiers area. Well, in this case, they had RBCs. Excuse me?
Could you speak up a little bit, please?
Sure, yeah, let me come out here, maybe where you can see me. So again, improvements across the board, both in the headworks facilities, a lot of similar improvements to not only what's been completed at your plant, but also what we envision being completed. But in the solids handling in particular, very similar setup, wherein they have two anaerobic digesters. All of the older gas equipment and pumps were in the central building here, in the sludge heaters, and then the covers as well were old. So we came in and we reconfigured this, basically upgraded these digesters, did structural improvements, cleaned them out because any tanks like this probably haven't been cleaned in some time. We put new covers on them, did all new gas handling, brand new premium efficiency boiler and sludge heaters, revamped their sludge press, and this over here was actually a brand new tank that is a secondary digester. You use your primaries to heat the sludge and break the sludge down. That then makes its way into the secondary digester, which is ambient temperature. That's where all your gas builds up, and this bubble right here was actually it's a gas holder that's on top. So instead of a floating cover, this is some of the latest technology that's being used to store your gas. In addition to that, they had a non-compliant flare, which has to be, 100 feet from any building, I believe, so we put a new flare in for Malone as well. Another example up in the North Country.
Ken, can I ask one question? Because
Sure.
Malone is 3.3 MGD average and an 8 MGD peak. Is Webster 5 MDG and a 7.5 peak?
Town flow, yeah, 7.
No?
Go ahead, Rick.
No, permit is 7.5, it's 2.5 is the building. We're designed for 5 million with the average.
Speak up, I couldn't hear that.
Sorry, our permit is 7.5 million, but 2.5 is the village.
Right,
Our treatment capacity is 5,
fine.
average about 3 right
We're averaging about 3?
now. Yeah.
So that is close to Malone. That is,
Right.
okay.
And then, keep in mind, when we size those secondary clarifiers, we have to look at 20-year growth, peak flow rate. Those can handle 12, 16 million?
Yeah, I think it's the peak.
16 MGD.
Instantaneous flow coming in, so with Webster, good news with Webster, there's a pretty decent, I think we were at almost 0.75% per year at growth, so I think 20 years, we were about 15-16% higher ahead. So look forward is quite a bit more than you see in the world. That's kind of been what's happened in Webster, obviously, for the past several decades.
A couple things too, you see a belt filter press here. Currently, you have a centrifuge and an older press. You're going to see some different technologies here. Again, these are things that we would look at alternatives similar to a PER. And then also with septic receiving. You can run the gamut on just dumping into a manhole with a screen, or in this case we put in card actuated dumping where you can keep track and every hauler gets a card and so on. It goes in that way. So again, in the village of Potsdam, 2 anaerobic digesters, very similar configuration again to what you have here in the town. And we came in and basically revamped all of the gas handling and safety equipment, the covers, the pumps, sludge heating, sludge mixing is critical for efficiency and maintaining temperature in your anaerobic digesters.
Ken, what is that bottom picture? What are we looking at?
This here?
Yep.
So, again, you take these covers off. Typically, you're going to have a concrete structure that needs refurbishing, and everything's got to be clean. And once you do that, what we did here is we came in and put in this piping system with these valves that are directional, and this basically takes liquid sludge and pumps it into the digester, and in different directions gets a nice optimal mix going in at full depth in the digester. Right now, what's your mixing system consist of?
Theory?
When it was built,
Bubble, or cannon.
Cannon, the bubble gunner. This is one of the typical ones that we use, versus another opportunity is a roof-mounted mixer, which George can cover. And then in this case, that's a screw press, which is some recent technology that we've been using at some of the smaller plants.
So the 6 examples that we're throwing to you, Ken has gone over the first 2 because he's been more involved in those, but I've actually had involvement on both of those facilities as well in concept and a lot of the startup issues that happens at all these facilities. So I've been to both, but I really cut my teeth in the anaerobic digestion world by managing the Gloversville-Johnstown wastewater plant for over 15 years. So about 3 hours to the east of you. When you talk about the term WRF, Gloversville-Johnstown tried to become one of the first WRFs in New York State. And everybody can get to that term everybody doesn't have to do it the same way. For Gloversville, it was about expanding anaerobic digestion capacity because of industry in the area. A lot of dairy waste is there because of the Fayet and Euphrates Cheese Company. And that waste is converted in the anaerobic digestion. The middle picture is power generation. And Gloversville-Johnstown generates all of the power at their wastewater plant from converting the organic waste to biogas, plus they actually export excess power. So that became one of the first facilities designed by B&L to export power in New York State. To the left, it's the gas holder, some technology that's going to be very similar technology for Webster. The bottom line is the WRF at Gloversville-Johnstown was very nice. It's a nice term, but Gloversville-Johnstown tried to say we had declining population, we had to change our business formula in taking advantage of the anaerobic digesters, help stabilize sewer rates. So instead of sewer rates raising, they use the resources of reclaiming energy to help in their bottom line. So that was the main drivers for that facility. There's someone in this room who spent a lot of time at Rome. He's your current operator. He embarked on a project to take old digester technology that was in disrepair, and a project we are in construction right now on is taking a digester. The bottom left picture is a 70-year-old anaerobic digester that was in very bad shape. The good news is the concrete was good. It needed covers, it needed a mixing system. That's the pumped mixing system like Ken was showing you from Malone, from Potsdam, being installed, a similar one. That technology is being used on one of their digesters. They're going with some other technology called linear motion mixer, some of the new cutting edge stuff that's out there for one of their other digesters. So existing tanks being reconstructed as part of this project. They have screening equipment to screen waste, organic waste, to get debris out of it before the waste goes into the digester. And that building up there is so they can accept some tankers. As trucks bring the organic waste, it can be screened prior to going to the digesters. So this project it's been a lot about creating additional revenue, but also improving the only part of the plant that wasn't improved, and that was the solids handling systems in the anaerobic digesters. Town of Niskayuna is a project, a $30 million project that was a rebuild of the plant, but there was 25% of it is a project that involved the solids handling. Bottom right, it's a belt press. Their belt press was falling apart. It was rotted away. This is a new stainless or a new galvanized belt press being installed. The middle bottom picture is a new cover going on their existing digesters. Digester covers are not in good shape at the Webster facility. They're actually in very poor shape. Those would be removed as part of this project, and possibly a cover similar to what you're seeing could be installed. They had some tanks that had the gas storage on top, similar to what Ken was talking about earlier. This is a 3.5 MGD facility, so there's some similarities in size. For them, the driver here was getting old infrastructure updated and actually using that biogas for a variety of things. Heating the digesters, doing sludge drying, and in their case, they have a generator to generate some power. Yes, sir.
I noticed in a lot of your presentation, I see belt presses. Webster changed to a centrifuge about 15, 16 years ago.
Yes.
And used the belt press as a backup in
Correct.
case of breakdown. Is belt press the way to go now?
No, it could be. Their centrifuge is a wonderful tool. Belt press is a wonderful tool. You have those choices. The facility I ran made a conscious effort to stay belt press because the maintenance staff could maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
They felt comfortable with it. They had been maintaining the bearings and belts. What belt presses are great is they run very, very slow RPMs. The bearings turn very slowly, so they tend to have less maintenance on them. And most people who have socket wrenches and torches can put a new bearing on or put a new belt on.
Mm-hmm.
The centrifuges, from when I was running a centrifuge in Rochester Northwest Quadrant plant back in the 70s, was rare. They were kind of original centrifuges, relatively slow. These new ones are extremely fast RPMs, and I'm sure Art would agree, it's not something that can be maintained easily by our standard maintenance staff. It needs specialty people. So it depends what's important to you. Secondly, the centrifuge actually produces a very good cake product, but it's using a lot more energy to do that. So if kilowatts are important to you, because let's just say you're spending 15 cents a kilowatt hour, maybe the belt press would be better. So it depends on your situation. Tipping fees, electricity costs, all those things go into it. So I think you have an option. Obviously, you know both technologies. Either can work. It's really a local decision.
Okay, thank you.
No, you're fine. So we move on to a much larger project. And it's interesting. This is Altoona, Pennsylvania. This is under construction right now. The picture on the left, there's some brand new digesters being built. This is a community that never had an anaerobic digester. They're getting into the anaerobic digestion business because they want to make a solids product that eventually becomes for beneficial use and gets back on a cropland. So to do that, they wanted to stabilize their sludges through anaerobic digestion, and then they want to put those sludges through a sludge dryer. Because in Pennsylvania, similar to some of the problems we're having here locally, there's getting bans on how much sludges and cakes can go to the local landfill. What used to be a rule in Pennsylvania was if you were a landfill operator, 10% of what comes across the scale could be sludges and cakes from Art bringing it to them. Because of some operational problems at landfills in Pennsylvania, they've changed the rule to 5%, and now everybody's scrambling. Where do you go? And fees have risen. So in that case, that's why they're getting into the sludge drying business. Just was on the calls today at this facility in Pennsylvania. The B&L designed sludge dryer is going to be delivered in October. So what's interesting here is this project's a lot of money, a lot of work being done, but I will not use the power generation that Gloversville Johnstown does will not be happening here. They're going to take all that biogas and they're going to put it all into their sludge dryer. Instead of buying natural gas, they want to use biogas to do the cake drying. When you're all done, that cake, instead of having 80% water in it, or 75% water, depending on how good you do, it's going to have 5% water, 95% solids, so only a few truckloads are going out either for disposal or for beneficial use to a farm.
So that kind of runs the gamut, and what you see there in the discussion on the presses for the sludge. Minimally, we're going to look at 3 different types of presses, which are going to be kind of driven again by what the preference is and the staffing capabilities are. So with this, I'm sure you don't want to hear you got to do another study, but you have to do another study. But it's going to take a different look at this, and it's got a different spin on it. And as I mentioned, as a NYSERDA Flex Tech consultant, we have the ability to bring these projects to NYSERDA, wherein they will fund a portion of the study cost, which I'll get into. But we became a Flex Tech consultant based on our qualifications, and minimally we need to bring three projects a year, I believe. And it starts as a planning grant, and ultimately what you're doing is developing a PER with a capital improvement plan that could ultimately leverage implementation money through NYSERDA as well. As I said, it's consistent with what's been done already with the EFC, DEC compliant PER. So we're going to leverage as much of that as we can, especially on the process evaluation side. But again, we're going to take a deeper dive into the alternatives, power use, life cycle costs, and compare all of those to come up with an ultimate recommendation based on your preferences and equipment. And then, let's see, so yeah, that pretty much covers that. So this is our estimation of the grant that can be gotten through FlexTech. So we were provided with the website that includes the town's power bills, which is both, in this case, natural gas and electric. So we went through that and took a look at that for the plant site in its entirety, and it looked like for 2018, 2019, you're about $115,000 a year in electric costs and just under $30,000 for gas, totaling about $144,000 a year. So currently, NYSERDA's FlexTech grant is it's roughly 10% or up to 10% of your annual power costs, including both gas and electric, or no more than 50% of the study cost. So in this case, 10% of the 14 is roughly about a $14,000 and change NYSERDA grant that can be applied towards the study. So as a FlexTech firm, like I said, we bring projects to NYSERDA. Should the town move forward with this, we would provide a scope and a contract for town board execution. We would have a separate scope and contract, which you don't see, which we go to NYSERDA with the same scope, and they pay the balance. So right now, as I mentioned, it's a 10% reimbursement. It may increase up to 20%. And then these
Ken, what would make it increase to 20%?
I think just a change in the funding opportunity in the pond, they call it.
NYSERDA is trying to encourage more of this to happen, so they're trying to jumpstart more of these work-type projects, these energy efficiency, and NYSERDA, as time to time, will allow a higher percentage. So instead of potentially $14,000, there's some upside potential. I think we're just being conservative for now, saying the 10% is pretty much a guarantee, but there's some potential upside.
Okay.
So the scope of service, again, a lot of similarities to the PER. Ultimately, what we do want to do here is build a separate standalone engineering report that speaks to the WRRF opportunities. So within our scope, which we've provided a draft to Art and Rick for review, we envision doing minimally 3 workshops, both with town representatives, and as you did with the clarifiers, strongly encourage getting the DEC at the table early on in the project, make them a project partner, make them aware of it, and if it is in fact funded through a NYSERDA FlexTech grant, we would have FlexTech representatives at those meetings as well. As I mentioned, we're going to update the 20-year flow and load projections over what we had done in the prior PER with more recent data. And then a deeper dive, as I said, into the unit processes that haven't been addressed to date, that pretty much being your secondary clarifiers and the solids handling pumps. But that would include headworks, so looking at enhanced screening as well as grit removal. You already have one grit removal system there. We may look at putting a second one in. The biological nutrient removal, your aeration system, you've got some more stringent nutrient loads specified, or nutrient limits rather, specified in your species permit. There's some different alternatives we'll look at aeration, again, in increasing the level of instrumentation control and the links to your SCADA system, which is there right now. The 3Ds of biosolids. So George we talked about digestion, dewatering, and disposal. Again, there's immediate cost savings depending on your percent water or your percent solids and where that goes. We will look at various alternatives under that, including various technologies, including sludge dryer, belt press, centrifuge, and so on, whatever we identify with the operators in workshop number 1. And then the opportunities here for potentially operating as a merchant facility, again, reinstating your ability to accept septage and leachate, and putting in facilities to accept those, different levels of dumping stations and tracking and whatnot. All of this, again, linking into your SCADA system and automated control to optimize energy use. And then one thing we also will add to this is looking at these older buildings, which probably today don't meet energy code, but preparing models of each of the buildings, in particular the administration building, modeling the space, the roofs, the windows, the doors. That's a common item under the NYSERDA FlexTech. And then ultimately, again, capital costs, annual operation maintenance costs, short-lived asset costs. We'll provide that analysis for each of the alternatives and ultimately make a recommendation. And then, as we did with Phase 1, identify a plan of finance, with Paul's assistance to identify what the impacts may be to your users and what types of grants you may need to offset capital costs. That will all be done in a draft report for your review before it goes final. So based on the scope that we presented to Art and Rick, we're at a $42,000 study cost, less than anticipated NYSERDA grant. So the fee to the town would be $27,600 for...
Unless we get 20%.
Correct.
We can only hope.
And was there something about 20%, but not to max out at more than 50% of the project cost? So would we be capped at $21,000 in that schematic?
Yeah.
It's just 27,000.
Yeah.
I don't want us getting all excited about shooting for 28,000 in grant when I thought I heard that there was a either or. 20%, but no more than 50.
They're usually, the 20% can happen, and yes, the 50% rule usually happens too. So if that's the case, I guess the maximum, if we hit it, would be the 20 rule.
Okay. But I'm with you, Barry. I like the 20%, but I want us to have realistic expectations.
Well, realistically, I'm thinking 14.4.
You're a wise man.
So, as always, Art has laid down a pretty aggressive scope here, or schedule rather, to go with this scope.
If he's not one
However,
thing, he's consistent.
Considering our knowledge of the plant and the work that's been done to date with your staff and the board as well, I think we can stick to the schedule. So, tonight we're here presenting our proposed scope. Like I said, there is a detailed scope that would be attached to a contract. Once it's cleared, these gentlemen, it would make its way to the board for your consideration, and if authorized, we would start immediately here in February. Have the draft report to the town through Rick and Art by May, and the final report to the agencies by July. And again, we're starting to see some funding programs coming out. We want to get this out as quick as possible, and basically, get this into EFC to have a project listed in the CWSRF this year, 2021. So that's the driver there, and that's typically August, which we would definitely plan to meet. And then, once that's approved, move to final design by amendment to this contract. That being completed from August of this year through January of next year, out to bid in a favorable bidding market, and awarded by March of 2022, and start construction a year and 3 months from now. Absolutely.
Okay.
Head is spinning.
Pardon?
My head is spinning.
Well, you know what, Ken, if you wouldn't mind, and if the board doesn't mind, I know the next page is Q&A, yeah. So, can I do a little dissection, per se, of that timeline that Mr. Petrone has put out there? The first item in January of '21, there's 3 things there, I think. The complete scoping, is that done?
Yes,
Is the proposal presentation what we're doing right now?
yes.
Would the board authorization be what you'd consider a resolution that the board has said that we're going to appropriate or whatever the funds for spending up to $27,600 or whatever on something like this? Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? So now you're into February. Did we just effectively, as a town board, hand the baton back to you?
Yeah.
Somewhere February, March, April, May, so in a 3 to 4 month period, you commence evaluation, and you present a draft report to the town in May. Okay. Now, that report comes in, is the next things in July, is that predicated on the fact that the report comes in, which is essentially a PER, and somewhere between May and July, are you assuming that the town board does a resolution to proceed with this?
Well, I think you would accept the final recommendations within the PR, Tom.
Okay.
Not necessarily proceed with it, and then also you basically authorize submission of this thing to EFC to get it listed in the intended use plan.
Okay, so if you're going to EFC, and I assume, for the most part in July, and I don't want to convolute this, you're going for a 25% grant on whatever the estimated PER cost of this is, or
So-
the cost that the board.
Okay, so the SRF program, again, is the subsidized interest rate loan program that typically is going to be your base financing.
Right.
Now, the assumption would be that we develop a project here that scores high enough that gets you basically above a subsidy line. EFC funds projects down to a certain score. In the following year, those below that don't qualify for subsidized interest rate and go to market rate, which is where we were with phase 1, and we determined that the town was better off going conventional bonding versus going through SRF guaranteed financing. The grant you're talking about, which is the $3 million grant you got for phase 1,
Yeah.
is the WIA grant. That program has not been released yet this year. We don't know when it's going to come about. Certainly, that would be one program we would go after. Another one which just came out this year is the Green Innovations Grant Program, the GIGP, which in recent years has only funded stormwater and water quality. They've now expanded that to include energy efficiency at wastewater treatment plants. So that may come out, or will come out again. And then NYSERDA implementation grant. So the plan is, once we have that PER to EFC, then that allows you to do your bond resolutions, basically move yourself to shovel ready to position yourself for WIA and any other programs that may come out, and that plays into your plan of finance.
I think I understand that. Does all the board members understand that?
I think I do.
Okay. So what, in essence, that August milestone of the final per IUP submission deadline, is that more on you, or is that on the town?
Us,
Okay.
us providing you with a report that you're comfortable with and will basically support moving forward.
So the submission, the draft report's gonna be, it's gonna have all the main things in it. It's gonna be a little rough, because it's a draft. If staff and the board is feeling comfortable and gives some input, then between that draft time period in August, it's finalized, so that report can be the signed, sealed, and delivered report and delivered to the state with your, of course, the plan of action. And maybe that plan of action is a sludge dryer. Maybe that plan of action is fixing 2 covers on a digester and doing a third digester. Whatever that is, because I think what the direction from staff is let's go in with we're hitting a restart button here. Let's throw everything on the table that Ken's talking about and identify what that project is. And I think your staff obviously is a very diligent staff and will be looking over our shoulder. And secondly, they'd be working with us. In February, Tom, if you hand this project to Ken, that doesn't mean we don't talk to you until May. These workshops and stuff, we're hand in hand because it's all of our benefits that we're aiming this all in the right direction, and we understand each other. But it's up to us, and especially the engineering staff, to pull the numbers together to give you those options so you can make informed decisions.
I'm going to just ask one more, and then I'll step off and let the rest of the board members, if they have any comments or questions. Obviously, we've gone through a similar process at the town for this. It was before my time, but it ended up bonding $9 million, getting a WIA grant for 25%. And I know it's not the term you want to use anymore, Art, but we went off and did phase 1, the secondary clarifiers, whatever.
That's what it was. Yeah.
I beg your pardon?
And that's exactly what it was. Basically.
Okay. I'm familiar, I think, with another government entity that has somewhat gone through this process, but then has now just stopped and kind of in a holding pattern of whether they're going to accept the WIA grant and the terms and all that. And it looks as though that kind of delay could go on for 2 years. And I guess what I'm asking is for the board to consider authorizing the study and the monies of $25,000. By no means is that authorizing that we have figured out how to bond and grant and whatever, what could be $10+ million. And as you go through this timeline, where does the town board basically in this timeline say we're going for your for the money, the grants, all the stuff? Where is that? Because obviously it's before the construction starts in April 2022. I gotta believe it's before the bidding and the award in March. So is it somewhere in that August 21 to January 22nd, or do you not do final design before?
Yeah, so, again, the intent would be to give the board a final report by July. That August date has just been the traditional date that EFC says, all right, we need your report by here. So, again, our thought here is we're finished by July, and then similar to your phase 1, any project like this has to go through the environmental review, the seeker. And then once you do the seeker on it, that brings you to the point where you can adopt the bond resolution. So that typically would happen in the 2 months, July, August.
And I apologize if I'm not asking the question the right way. Can you apply for these grants and all that to see what you get before the town board basically then commits to bonding and all that? Or is it something where the town board has to commit to the money before you submit for grants?
Right. In today's funding world, with a WIA grant, yes, you have to show your commitment, which includes your seeker and adopting your bond resolution.
Where does that happen in this timeline?
Again, it would be
The good thing about seeker is it has to happen, it happens before all the final design. It actually has to be an action you must take very early on, right when the PER is being developed. At the end, you can actually run the environmental review process. I think, and I'm going to jump in, and I hope I'm not jumping in here improperly. Let's just say the hypothetical $10 million that you threw. Let's just say that's the project. The question that the town will have later in the summer or here, beginning of fall, is do you go in a wait and see process to see what all the grant potential would be, or do you, on a parallel basis, initiate the design work to get a project ready for bid while you're going and you're trying to anticipate what the grants are? Until the bidding award of March of 2022, other than some additional design work, that's when the big decision is made of awarding the big contracts to the contractors. And by that time, you should clearly know what your grant potential is and what the local share is. So I think the way I look at it is, because I was on your side of the aisle a lot more than I've been on this side, I think we see this to keep the project moving, because one of the things that we see now is having shovel-ready projects ready means they have to be designed and ready to go. Because one of the other funding sources is obviously there's some chat at the federal level of something to stimulate some infrastructure. But if you're not ready, you can't play in that game. So the concept here, and I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth when I say this, is the whole thought is to get this project positioned by getting this PER done and then commencing some actual design so it truly is a shovel-ready job. And then you can make the big decision, do you release bids and do you award construction?
Well, one more thing to add to that too is, this project differs from phase one because you're actually looking at a project that could possibly build a grant. Okay, the numbers that were presented by Art and Rick looked at your immediate payback. That if you do these improvements on the solids handling side, number one, you're reducing your tipping fees, which could be $500,000 a year, which could pay for your debt or be applied toward your debt service. Number two, that if you do in fact put in and reinstate your leachate and your septage receiving, that's revenue coming in that could also be applied. So that there is a difference that will be borne out of the plan of finance based on what we put together to ultimately come at, to show you what the net annual debt service would be, and then any supplemental grants that you would need beyond what you're going to achieve in the annual savings on O&M side.
And I think what Ken is chatting about, or is mentioning now, is really part of the parallel portion of what's being generated by this PER, is there is a pro forma associated with this. There are, number one, a better operating digester is going to reduce the amount of solids you have. A better operating dewatering device is going to reduce the amount of solids you have. If you go to a sludge dryer, you dramatically reduce the solids you have. If you are able to reinstate septage or whatever, you have a different revenue stream coming in. There's a lot of expense that's ahead of the town, but on this project, I think the beauty is it has some revenue potential to offset the bad things associated with a capital project. But we don't know, we don't have that answer tonight. That answer will be coming when that PER draft and the final comes out during the summer.
I'm all set. Mr. Canale?
Just to piggyback off the shovel ready, I was actually out of the Mount Bays, or whatever you want to say is. I was at a conference in Albany about 3 years ago, and it was a state funding agency that stated
piggyback off of that, and that's something I learned from Pete in this project, Pete and Ken, is once we were shovel-ready with phase one, then it opened up the door for that $3 million grant. And I've sat in those meetings when they said this, yeah, we want to give that money away, we want to give it to people who can use it, who are ready to use it.
And if I could just jump on that as well, a project that Rick in his past life worked on with us received $3.5 million WIA and $1 million NYSERDA. Just today, or just yesterday, with the grant that Ken is talking about that's now opening up, it appears that the balance of the project, since it hasn't been built, is now eligible for additional money. The state agencies have to get the money out, so there's a $15 million project that's halfway done. It looks like that $7 million balance that the town has to pay the contractors is now grant eligible, and they're going into the CFA portal. They don't know it yet, but they'll be going into the CFA portal and applying, because there's $17 million became available last week. It became available, and there's a project ready. B&L has that project in their back pocket. We can apply for our client and, cross our fingers. We hope to be giving good news to that client. But the project's ready. It's really the key.
And I said on that call the other day as well with the green energy, and my takeaway was the same. They're including wastewater. They want to give the money away. They want to see some improvements. It's out there for the taking.
Bill?
I worked on these projects before. You gotta put up money up front and hope that you get money on the backside. Just how it works.
And Bill, on that, and what's great about this is that you brought up the last time, is that phase one is really just infrastructure upgrades. There was no, what we want to call an ROI. This project has, what you emphasized, it has cost savings, revenue generation. So this project has pieces of it that will help pay for it too.
Barry?
Well, we definitely have a need. And I think moving forward, that need should include revenue development. I mean, we have the need to, where we actually, we need to do this. We need to go to phase two. We know that. What we don't have already assigned is revenue development, the drying, the septage, receiving. I think that should all be part of it. That's just my thought.
Agree. Okay.
I don't have anything to add. I feel the same way that Barry does. I mean, when you look at the potential savings and the potential revenue of a project like this, the cost for this study pales in comparison.
Yeah.